All right, so have you ever wondered if the dating playbook needs like a refresh as we get older?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like some things about attraction probably stay the same,
Right.
but our lives, like the whole context, that's always changing.
It's true. So, like, does the advice we got in our 20s still work in our 30s, 40s, 50s?
It's almost like imagine a game where the rules are the same,
Okay.
but the players and the whole field keep changing.
I like that. Makes me think of all the advice we get from like movies, magazines,
Oh, yeah.
even friends. So, where do we even start to like make sense of it all?
Well, the sources you found, they tackle that head on.
Good.
One compares advice given to different age groups, like teens often hear, just be yourself.
Right.
20s, it's more like, put yourself out there, date multiple people.
Yeah, yeah.
And as we hit our 30s, 40s, the focus shifts to knowing what you want.
It's like the advice grows up with us, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, I remember in my 20s, dating felt more like an adventure.
Yeah.
Now I'm more about emotional maturity, shared goals, that kind of thing.
It's totally natural for priorities to shift, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. In your 20s, you're still figuring out your own identity,
Oh, for sure.
career, what you even want out of life. So dating's part of that.
Right. It's like you're dating yourself at the same time you're dating other people.
Exactly. But as we get older, we have a better sense of self, what we want in a partner.
Okay, yeah.
It becomes less about exploring every option, more about finding someone who fits your life, your vision.
So does that mean the advice needs to mature too?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Like less playing hard to get,
Yeah.
more open communication?
One source highlights that. They talk about how emotional intelligence, self-awareness, that increases with age.
That makes sense.
And those are assets when dating.
Yeah.
Helps you understand your needs, see red flags.
Instead of playing games, you're ready for those honest talks about what you want.
Right.
But hold on, we can't forget the elephant in the room. Technology.
Oh, yeah, it's changed everything.
It's revolutionized dating, hasn't
Yeah.
it? And this one source really dives into how it affects different generations.
It's amazing. Younger generations, they're like natives in this digital world.
Totally.
They navigate these platforms so effortlessly, it's second nature.
And meanwhile, older generations are like adapting, learning the new rules.
Exactly.
So how does this tech revolution change the advice we should be getting? Like, is swiping right the new coffee shop meet cute?
The old advice just doesn't cut it anymore, does it? The whole landscape of dating has changed.
Yes.
So the advice has to catch up. It needs to be relevant to the challenges each generation faces online.
Okay, so we agree the playing field has changed, dating's different, the advice needs to evolve.
Absolutely.
But let's get specific. One source suggests different approaches for different life stages.
Okay.
For younger daters, it's about self-discovery, building confidence,
Right.
maybe even getting your heart broken a few times.
It's part of the process.
Then for those who are older, maybe back on the scene after divorce or a long relationship, the focus shifts
Yeah.
more towards emotional readiness, finding someone whose values really align.
Makes sense, right. You've had experiences, you know what you don't want.
Yeah.
So you're better at recognizing what you do want.
But how do we know what advice is right for us? What questions should we be asking?
That's where it gets interesting. It's not just about following rules, it's about knowing yourself.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some key questions we should be thinking about?
First off, what are your non-negotiables? What values, qualities are must-haves in a partner?
So, defining what really matters to us. But what about compromise? Nobody's perfect, right?
Compromise is crucial in any relationship, of course.
Right.
But there's a difference between compromising on, say, who does the dishes and compromising on your core values.
That's a good point. It's like picking your battles, I guess.
Exactly. Another crucial question. What have you learned from past relationships? What patterns have you seen? What do you want to do differently moving forward?
So, looking back to move forward, basically, using those experiences to learn.
Precisely. Our past relationships, they can be amazing teachers if we let them.
Yeah, I can see that.
They can help us spot red flags, break unhealthy patterns, make better choices in the future.
This is all making a lot of sense. It's not just about finding the right techniques, but about understanding ourselves and what we truly want in a relationship.
You got it. And that's a huge shift in dating advice. It's less about game playing, more about authenticity,
Yeah.
knowing your worth, and seeking a connection that truly fulfills you.
This is making me rethink my whole approach, honestly. It's not just about checking boxes, but finding someone who complements your life, helps you grow.
That's a great way to put it. It's about finding a partner who inspires you to be your best self.
This is all so insightful. We've covered how advice should adapt as we age, the impact of technology, self-reflection. It's a lot. But before we wrap up part one, there's one question I can't shake. One source talks about crafting advice that's, age appropriate. Like, what would that look like?
Right.
What would be different for someone in their 20s versus, say, their 40s or 50s?
It goes back to those shifting playing fields we talked about. For someone in their 20s, it might be about exploring, trying different dating styles, figuring out what they value.
So less pressure to settle down, more about, like, gaining experience,
Yeah.
right?
Building confidence.
Yeah.
The advice might encourage saying yes to new stuff, even if it's a little out of their comfort zone.
Okay, I like that. Like what? Give me an example.
Trying a new app, going to a singles event, just talking to people they find interesting.
I see. So it's about expanding their horizons.
Yes, exactly. Now, someone older, maybe getting back into dating after divorce or being single for a while, it's different.
Yeah, what would be helpful for them?
It might be about being more intentional, focusing on emotional readiness, communication, not wasting time on things that don't feel right.
It's like at that point, you've learned what you don't want.
Yeah.
So you're better at spotting what you do want.
Exactly. And they've probably seen the good and bad of relationships, so they're looking for something more mature, stable.
Right.
The advice could be to be upfront about your goals, expectations, right from the start.
Makes sense. So are there specific strategies that work better for different ages? Like, is playing it cool still a thing?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
A lot of the old advice is about, like, games.
Yeah.
But as we mature, that can feel fake, tiring.
Totally. In my 20s, I might have waited days to text back. Like, ooh, mystery. Now.
All right.
If I'm interested, you'll know it.
It shows how our views change. The rules from our younger days, they often don't work as well later on.
Right.
The advice for older daters might be to be direct, honest in how they communicate.
So ditch the games, be genuine. I can get behind that.
It's about recognizing everyone's time is valuable. Being upfront prevents confusion, heartache.
Okay, this makes me think about advice specifically for women. Like let him make the first move, that kind of thing. Does that still apply today?
That's tricky. A lot of that advice is rooted in old gender roles.
Yeah.
It doesn't really fit with how modern relationships work.
So playing hard to get could backfire.
It might, especially if the other person values equality, directness.
Right.
They might see it as disinterest, playing games.
In the past, there was this idea that women had to be more passive in dating. But things are changing, right?
For sure. People are looking for partners who are confident, assertive, no matter their gender.
Yeah.
The advice might be for women to initiate conversations, ask someone out, express interest directly.
That's so much better. Takes the pressure off waiting for someone else.
It empowers women to take charge of their dating experience.
Okay, so what's the most important advice that applies to everyone, regardless of age or gender?
I'd say be authentic, be true to yourself, be clear about what you want, don't hide who you are.
I love that. And it ties into what we were saying about emotional intelligence.
Right.
This source even links emotional intelligence to successful relationships.
As we mature, we understand ourselves better, our emotions, how to handle those tricky relationship dynamics.
Yeah.
That's emotional intelligence.
So it's not just knowing what you want, but being able to say it and also understanding your partner's point of view.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Emotional intelligence is key for healthy, happy relationships.
Okay.
It helps you resolve conflicts, set boundaries, create a safe space for intimacy.
This makes me wonder if dating advice should also help people develop that emotional intelligence.
That's a great point. It's not just about finding someone who ticks all the boxes.
Right.
It's about nurturing a connection where both people can grow emotionally.
So compatibility, sure, but also potential for growth, support.
Absolutely. And that's where the advice should go. It's not just about finding the one. It's about building a relationship that helps both people become their best selves.
This is giving me a whole new outlook on dating. It's not a game. It's an opportunity for personal and relationship growth.
And that's a beautiful way to look at it.
This deep dive has been so insightful. It's amazing how much dating has changed and how we can adapt our approach.
We've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore about how our lives and society affect how we approach love and connection.
Speaking of exploring, this source mentions a whole podcast episode on the evolving nature of relationships. I'm really intrigued by this idea of increased emotional intelligence in older daters. What's that about?
It's fascinating. Our emotional capacity seems to grow with experience. As we mature, we tend to understand ourselves better, our needs, how to communicate them.
So it's not just knowing what we want, but being able to express it so our partner gets it.
Exactly. And it also means listening to their perspective, even if it's different from ours.
This makes me wonder if advice for older daters should focus on those communication skills. What are some tips that might help?
One thing is learning to say what we need and want assertively, but not aggressively.
So it's about finding that balance, being direct but respectful.
Precisely. And it's important to develop active listening skills,
Okay.
really paying attention to what our partner is saying, their words, their body language, trying to understand their view, even if we don't agree.
This reminds me how important empathy is in relationships. It's not just about getting our own needs met.
Right.
It's about understanding and supporting our partner's needs too.
Absolutely. Empathy is the foundation of a strong, healthy connection. It lets us connect on a deeper level, create that sense of understanding and support.
This is all so insightful. I feel like we're really getting to the core of what makes relationships work.
And it all starts with self-awareness and being willing to learn and grow.
Well, I'm definitely feeling better equipped to navigate dating with all these insights. But before we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive, there's one more question that's been on my mind.
Sure.
Okay, so we've talked about how dating advice needs to grow with us and how important emotional intelligence is. Right.
But I keep coming back to this idea of age-appropriate advice. Like, what would that actually look like?
Yeah.
What might work for someone in their 20s versus their 40s or 50s?
That's where we take all this theory and make it practical. For someone in their 20s, the advice might be to really embrace that exploration phase.
Okay.
Try different dating styles, figure out what they truly value in a partner, maybe even have a few heartbreaks along the way.
So it's not so much about finding the one right away. It's more about those experiences building confidence.
Exactly. The advice could be to say yes, more, even to things that feel a bit scary or outside their comfort zone.
Like what kind of things?
Trying a new dating app, going to a singles event, or even just striking up conversations with people they find interesting. It's about broadening their horizons, learning about themselves as they go.
It makes sense. In your 20s, you're still figuring out who you are, what you want out of life.
Right.
It's like dating is part of that whole journey. You got it. But now think about someone older, maybe getting back into dating after a divorce or being single for a while. It's a different ballgame.
Yeah. What would be more helpful for them?
The advice might shift to being more intentional. Focus on emotional readiness, clear communication, not wasting time on connections that just don't feel right.
It's like at that point, you've already learned what you don't want.
Exactly.
So you're better at recognizing those things you do want.
And they've probably seen the good and bad sides of relationships, so they're looking for something more mature, stable.
Right, right.
The advice might be to be upfront about their goals, expectations from the very beginning.
That makes sense. But is there ever a point where we should just, accept what's out there? Or is it always okay to hold out for what we really want? This whole settling thing always gets me thinking.
That's a tough one, and it's so personal.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to knowing the difference between compromise on those little things and settling for something that just doesn't truly fulfill you.
So, it's okay to be flexible on, say, hobbies or taste in music.
Right.
But not on core values, life goals, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The key is knowing yourself well enough to decide what you're truly willing to bend on and what are those absolute deal breakers.
This has been so helpful. We've covered so much today, from how dating advice needs to evolve to emotional intelligence, even those practical tips for different age groups. Any last words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Just remember, dating should ultimately be about self-discovery and connection. Be kind to yourself, stay open to new experiences, and trust that the right person will come along when the time is right.
And hey, maybe that person is out there right now listening to this deep dive and rethinking their whole dating game plan.
I hope so.
That would be amazing. Well, that's all the time we have for today. But before we go, I want to leave you with one last thought. How has your view on dating and relationships changed as you've gotten older? What kind of advice would help you most right now? Think about it, and until next time, happy dating.